Alright, okay, good evening everyone. Okay, we'll get started for today's session over here. Okay, as usual, yeah, what we're gonna go through is a outlook of some of the events to take note of. Then we'll look into the charts, and of course following that will be a quick Q&A. Okay, and if you have any questions, of course, just put it up and I'll be able to look at it and answer your questions. And after that, we'll do a quick wrap up and to also update you some of the upcoming events, both offline and online, that we're gonna have. Okay. So good. Let's look into a quick summary of last week. Okay. So over here last week the focus is very much on CPI. Okay, so the US CPI actually print slightly higher than the previous month. So previous month was at 3.0. Okay, and the previous week's data came out at 3.2. So that's going to be crucial because the conversation then starts to pivot into, will the Fed hike interest rate for another time going into end of the year? Now that's where the possibility lies, and we did observe the US dollar actually strengthen post CPI data. Okay, so from Thursday onwards, we did see the dollar strengthen going into this week here as well. Okay, so definitely that will have some impact in certain trades that we're looking into for this week. Now going into the new week here, we do have a couple of I would say news that you probably want to take note of. The first one will be tomorrow Canadian CPI happening around 8:30 p.m. and of course CPI data is always going to be important. Now for Canadian side, the market expectation is that CPI is going to come down. And obviously the actual data being released tomorrow is going to have an impact. Okay, so if you can't get a surprise, then naturally that would have a bigger volatility in the Canadian dollar. Then following that on Wednesday morning, we have the RBNZ. Now, if you are deciding whether to trade the RBNZ news, always take note that New Zealand dollar has a lower liquidity, and therefore, any kind of major news related to the Kiwi, when there is a surprise, you may end up getting kind of experience some kind of slippage. Okay, so factor that in if you are looking to trade the New Zealand dollar. Okay, so that's also a risk involved. Okay, so this week here is relatively quiet for the dollar. The main focus is still very much on the Canadian CPI. So with that said, there's a good chance that going for this week here, we're gonna see the dollar continue to strengthen with last week's CPI. Okay, so with that said, let's take a look at the charts. Okay, we're gonna kick off with the dollar index. Okay, so you can see over here the dollar index is indeed strengthening as we're speaking. Okay, now I kind of updated a little bit in terms of the view and the analysis over here. So right now we're looking at potentially a wave 3 development. Okay, so from the low here, we kind of have 1, 2, and this is basically within wave 3 with the expectation of 161.8. Okay, somewhere around 103.90, that will be the immediate target for wave 3. And after which we'll expect some kind of a pullback to develop wave 4 and then a longer term move back up. Okay, so that means that in the short run, we're likely going to be seeing more dollar strength, and of course any corrective pullback in the dollar can be seen as a buy trade opportunity. Okay, so be patient, of course. You definitely do not want to just jump in. Every time we see an impulse, I always say just wait for the correction, wait for a pullback, then you get involved in it. Okay, so dollar quite straightforward. We're bullish onto that. Expect a little bit more upside going into the week. And of course, if you put that into the euro, okay, seldom we trade the dollar index directly, so the focus here it will then be on euro dollar. So we did get that sell off, okay, since last Thursday going into Friday, and then today the market continued to drop. Obviously this is an impulse, okay, so don't jump in right now, but if you can get a corrective pullback maybe by Wednesday this week, we're gonna get an opportunity to sell the euro dollar with a target all the way down to 1.0700. Okay, so that will give us a very nice 3 wave as a first push here, and then this would be a 3 wave corrective structure, and of course we are expecting a little bit of a structure like that. Okay, so something similar in terms of this drop here, right? So do expect a little bit something like this coming down, right? So we kind of have this drop started, wait for a corrective pullback, and then that will give you a decent sell trade opportunity to the downside. Okay. So as again, this is quite clear. And in terms of structure, in terms of direction, you know, just want to focus on the downside right now. Okay. Now pound dollar is pretty much the same as well. We're expecting downside. Today the market continues to drop following from last week's momentum. Pound dollar here, you want to be a little bit careful because we're coming back towards the previous low over here around 1.2590. Okay, now euro dollar has a little bit more downside opportunity. Okay, of course you still want to wait for the pullback, but GBP USD here seems to be you know, a little bit on the limitation to the downside, and we may see some kind of a bigger pullback when it tags that 1.2590, 1.26 area. Okay, so between the euro and the pound, okay, I'm actually a little bit more convicted to the euro dollar sell, whereas for pound dollar, while we're also looking at bearish bars, you just want to be a little bit more careful selling into the pound dollar. Okay, so I think quite clear structure, quite clear direction for the week. Okay, Aussie dollar just kind of tagged our initial area, which is the previous low here at 6460. Of course, you can see, you know, the dollar is strengthening across board, and there's a good chance that Aussie dollar may continue to drop a little bit more towards 6370 to complete the fifth wave structure over here. Okay, so what we can see over here is from this top 1, 2, okay, basically an extended wave 3, wave 4, and then we're currently in wave 5. So this week here, any corrective pullback can be seen as a short-term sell trade opportunity. Okay, and of course, again, if you compare it with the euro dollar do present a much better opportunity to the downside, right? In terms of like profit potential, the room in which price can drop is more obvious on the euro dollar as compared to like the pound and Aussie. Okay, but overall direction all is quite clear. You want to be selling the majors. Okay, and of course, you just need to go and pick which one give you the best setup to engage in a trade within the week. Okay, then we have the dollar Canadian. Now dollar Canadian over here, we're actually neutral, simply because I'm expecting this to come down a little bit more first before we look for the buy. So this means I'm a little bit more on the neutral to bullish perspective. Now obviously this channel here will automatically be updated as the market continues to develop. I mean, automatically means, you know, we'll be updating it. We don't trade the channel. Okay, so the idea of a channel is just for visual perspective. But what can happen over here is the market can still come back up, hit this top, come back down, hit this bottom before the push. Now overall, I'm bullish, but I wouldn't be looking to buy around the zone. I would prefer for price to come back down closer towards the previous low here for a buy trade instead. Okay, just because of risk to reward, and of course in terms of like certain principles, we always want to see a obvious three-wave move. Okay, so dollar CAD is still pushing higher right now. Obviously this needs to be updated depending on where price is gonna head towards, and you know, where is it likely gonna start to do a little bit of a U-turn towards the downside to complete and show a sign of a three-wave. So this definitely needs to be updated, right? Eventually. Okay, but for now, this is the expectation of it, right? We still want to wait for one more push down first. Then we'll be looking for the bullish trade to the upside to complete the 5-wave structure, right? So very clear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So I think most of the pairs are pretty much aligned with dollar strength. The structure seems to suggest that as well, and we kind of get a very nice little alignment, right? Dollar yen continue to push higher. Okay, I'm neutral on this simply because there's no setup. Okay, it broke that high, but you definitely do not want to just jump in here. Any form of corrective pullback will be definitely a buy trade opportunity, but we'll want to wait for the pullback first. Okay, and this is very impulsive, which means for the correction to develop, it takes time. And from my point of view, we're not likely going to get the correction within this week. Okay, so this one here on dollar yen for this week here, I'm just going to be neutral. I'm not going to pay too much attention to it. Unlikely we're going to get any opportunities to trade it. Okay, unlike the euro or even the Canadian, I think those are the ones that I'll pay a little bit more attention. Okay, gold continue to drop. Okay, so again, we're being neutral. Okay, if I can update this here, seems like price would likely come back and test this zone. Okay, again, it doesn't mean that you're just gonna buy off that zone, or you just want to sell the breakthrough of it. But the idea is a key area is where we're gonna pay a little bit more attention, and we want to observe how price is gonna react and what pattern is gonna develop around those key areas. Okay, so we'll continue to be patient on gold. Now, obviously, on a fundamental macro long-term perspective, I'm still very bullish on gold. There's no reason to be bearish on it. But for technicals right now, is telling us that at least for the mid-term, on a 4-hour scale perspective, there isn't a buy yet. Okay, so just be patient. I think this week, there's probably not much ongoing in terms of like dollar yen and gold. Unless we start to continue to see kind of like a crawl structure here, then perhaps next week will be a decent buy trade. Okay, but again, we need time. Okay, right now I'm not seeing any clue of that at the moment. Okay. Crude oil. Okay, crude oil over here, I'm also neutral, right? You kind of see that quite a bit of the commodities market as well as the dollar yen were basically just being patient. Now this move is pretty much extended, so I'm expecting at least some kind of a pullback and correction. Okay, can we trade the pullback? Can we trade the correction? Yes, if we are given a decent and clear pattern opportunity. Okay, so what I would like to see obviously is a first impulsive drop. Okay, ideally kind of breaking all the structure over here in a fast momentum move, and then we need to see a combination of a corrective pullback. This setup here will give us a short-term sell with certain targets. So again, this would need to develop first, and by the time on the 4-hour scale this completes itself, we'll likely head towards nearer end of the week. Okay, so if you're looking at commodities from a swing trade perspective, whether is it gold, whether is it crude oil, I think this week you just need to be very, very patient on that. Okay. Then we have S&P, which is the US equities market. With it pull back from the recent high around 4,600, and the recent development on S&P here you can see is pretty crawlish in nature, and we kind of expect from here perhaps a 3-wave pullback to the upside towards 50 and 618, and that would then kind of reset the move down here. So this would be our first move. This will be the second move, and then we still expect one more drop. Okay, and that will give us a pretty healthy corrective structure for a long-term upside. Okay, yeah. So the dollar is strengthening, and as I mentioned, last week's CPI is opening up the possibility where we're gonna see another rate hike. And of course, usually, one of the factors that impact the equities market is your interest rate, right? So if the Fed is gonna hike it another time, then we'll likely see some negative sentiment in the equities, and that will push price a little bit lower. Okay, so this week here, do expect a little bit of a push to the upside. If we can get a corrective pullback nicely towards the zone around 45.30 to 45.45, that will give us a sell opportunity towards the previous low here at 4,380. Okay, so S&P, general equities, I think going into this week, we'll probably see a little bit of a chop. Okay, and from there we might get a sell trade opportunity closer towards the end of the week. Okay, pound yen here does open up a possible trade if you go down to the lower time frame. On the H4, we're kind of seeing a little bit of a topish formation, right? We kind of see a lot of rejection around that 184. Again, it's a very strong psychological number because it's a nice whole number. We did get a lot of rejection over here. Of course, you compare that again, double top. This might bring the price down to retest the previous minor low here around 180.5. Okay, So that's definitely a huge opportunity to be able to capitalize on. Now I'm neutral on the 4-hour perspective because we don't have a setup. Okay, but the bias here is neutral to bearish, okay, which means I'm more interested to look for sell. But at the moment on the 4-hour, we don't have a sell trade setup. Now if you go down to the lower time frame, things may give you a different perspective. So on the lower time frame here, we may be able to get some kind of a breakout trade, of course, depending on how aggressive you are in identifying some swing lows for your break. You can obviously pick this around 183.40. If price breaks through that, of course, you can look for a breakout sell trade. Ideally, this should go with momentum, and then that will open up more possibility for the downside with this target here, right? So if you're conservative, give it some time. Again, Monday market usually is not going to be quote-unquote genuine. Okay, my observation is most of the time Monday is usually quiet. If it's not quiet, most of the moves are, what we call fake move, where Tuesday market tends to kind of erase whatever Monday has done. So even if today, for me, right, my perspective is if today the market actually breaks through this without any kind of like specific fundamental news to move it, okay, there's no surprise, there's nothing, and then this just breaks, there's a good chance Tuesday we're gonna get a pullback. Okay, so for me, I always try to avoid as much as I can executing trade on Monday. That's my basically my observation. Of course, sometimes the market does move very nicely, but most of the time it doesn't. Okay, so I tend to be a bit more patient on Monday movement and Monday market. What I would like to see, of course, is if today it just continue to consolidate like that, okay, I'll be more keen to put in a breakout trade tomorrow, right, to trade the breakout for London market perhaps on Tuesday. Now suppose it does break through, then of course all we just need to wait is a pullback correction, and then we'll take this trade to the downside as well. Okay, so there's no need for FOMO. Okay, there's no need to be afraid of missing out on opportunities, because the market is always presenting us with the next opportunity whenever just focus on that. So that's definitely one, right? Pound yen, you keep an eye on that. I think that's a very high possibility we're gonna get a trade this week. Okay, then going into euro pound here, this is tricky, right? So euro pound, you need to be very, very familiar with patterns to kind of navigate this particular structure. Okay, because there's basically two kinds of possibility here, right? One is this may have completed a 3-wave WXY, and if we get a corrective push here, we're definitely looking for sell to complete the bigger 1, 2, 3, right? Alternatively, if we don't get a corrective structure here and the price just bounce back up, something like this, okay, something like this, then there's a good chance this will hit higher to retest the previous top. Okay, and that will give us a bigger 1, 2, 3, and this would then be a 1, 2, and of course somewhere around here we're still expecting this to come back down, retest the bottom, and that's also an opportunity to trade. Okay, so euro pound is a little bit tricky in a way. You need to see in the next 2 days, by Wednesday, what is the development over here. And as I mentioned, if it's corrective, you look for the sell. If it bounces up strongly, you may look for a short-term buy, and then after that you look for the sell. Right, so that's on euro pound. Okay, this one I don't think that's really much to talk about. Pound Australia, we kind of have a triple touch at the top here. This is definitely a cross structure, so we're expecting downside, right? So for our, we did not really get an impulse correction structure yet, but on the lower time frame you may get something, right? Again, depending on your aggressiveness in executing trade. Okay, so on the lower time frame, you can keep an eye on the H1. If you kind of get a little bit of a corrective structure here, you can consider a breakout trade. Okay, so you kind of get involved early. By the time the price hits the bottom of this trend line, you would be able to shift your stops to break even and then see how it goes. If you're a little bit more conservative, my suggestion is wait for the price to come down here, does a correction at the bottom of the trend line, then only you trade a break to the downside. Okay, this entry would be more conservative than this entry. Okay, because what can happen is the market can basically consolidate, breaks, and then of course from here it goes back up before the bigger drop possible. Okay, so if you're taking the more aggressive approach, you need to be more active in managing your position. Okay. Yeah, so that's on the pound Australia side of things. Bitcoin here, we're basically back in that consolidation phase. So just be patient, right? You can see basically the high, the low. We're just ding donging this for I think a good like 1 month. Okay. So BTC or crypto general, not much activity there. My personal take here is wait for a breakout, a correction pullback. That will be a sell. That will be a buy trade to the upside. But until then, just put this aside, right? Okay. So to me, this week's focus is very much on some of the major pairs riding on dollar strength. Okay. So it can be euro, can be pound, can be Aussie. Basically, right on the dollar strength. Dollar CAD here, I would personally prefer this to come down a little bit more first before you look for the buy. So this is perhaps a little bit more towards end of the week kind of setup. Okay, gold not too much, and of course the next one here is non-dollar related, which is the pound yen, right? So pound yen, you may, depending on the time frame, okay, depending on how aggressive you are, you may get a potential trade as early as tomorrow. Okay. Yeah, so these are some of the things that you may want to keep a closer watch, okay, for opportunities within this week. Cool. Okay, yeah, so with that, let's take a look at some questions over here. Okay, so I see a question asking, the WXY, is it a 4 wave? Usually WXY is in 3, right? So in Elliott Wave is double 3. So within it, of course, there's a fractal nature, so you can break a bigger 3 wave into 7 waves and etc. Right? But I'm not too particular in the labeling. Okay, the labeling is just to do some annotation to communicate the idea of what are the patterns that we're looking at. Yeah, so WXY usually is a 3 wave move. Okay, seldom we see 4 waves in Elliott Wave, right? Because usually 3 waves is a complete set. If it's not 3, then usually it's a 5 wave move. Okay. Yeah, so this WXY is actually a 3 wave move, right? You can see here 1, 2, 3, right? And then of course internally this here, you can see as a 5 wave down. If you go into the details of it, but basically again I don't really need that. Okay, but if you go into the details, this would likely be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, yeah, okay, and then internal here is 1, 2, 3, right? So usually the label of it to me is the last step that I put onto a chart, right? You can see here, if I want to label now I can, but I think it's just premature to do any labeling as of now because the pattern hasn't been completed yet. But basically what we've shared just now, we're essentially looking at this potential pattern. Okay, A, B, C. That's where we kind of share, we're looking at this potential move to the downside. Okay, so just a very quick introduction, kind of sharing in terms of the labels. Okay. Okay, in terms of silver, would likely very much be like gold, right? So yeah, nothing much on silver because this is basically quite similar in the move of gold. Coming down to this territory here, wait for certain reaction for price to confirm that. Okay, so that's my take, right? So gold and silver basically is gonna be the same. You just wait. Okay, so this label here probably need to get updated, but just take it off first. Okay, so nothing much on gold and silver. Okay, yeah. Pound CAD basically will be looking a little bit more on the downside, but short term wise, this looks corrective in nature, which means we may get one more pushback up before the drop. Okay. Yeah, so that's the part where you need to be always adapting and managing, your perspective according to what the price is telling you. This move down is corrective. So whenever we see a corrective move like this, there's a good chance this will push back up before the drop. Now there's a slim possibility this would just drop like that, but it's not very high, okay? So my take here is, if you kind of look into this perspective, my take is wait for it to come back. Maybe we'll form a pre-double top structure somewhere there. Then you look for the sell again, right? So overall, it's still a sell because this is impulsive in nature. This is corrective in nature. This has high possibility. The downside has high possibility. The only thing here you want to take note of is, do you sell nearer to the top or do you sell here? And then of course you just need to assess your risk, right? Because if you sell here, your stop needs to go above it. Is it worthwhile, or would you rather prefer to wait for price to come back up? Give you some sign of a confirmation you're able to get involved in the sell at a better price point. Okay. But of course, if you're looking for a better price point, sometimes this may just take off. You might miss a trade. Okay, so each of this approach would have its own pros and cons. But the idea over here is we're generally looking at potential sell direction if you're looking at pound Canadian. Okay, somewhere back towards like 1.6670. If you're a little bit more conservative, you can aim a little bit higher at the previous high there, around 1.6720, right? So definitely downside. The question is just, would price make a slightly pushback for you to sell at a better price, or this would just drop? Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So that's on pound Canadian. Okay. Any other instruments that you guys are interested in? Okay, so basically the equities market, you can see Hang Seng and HSI. I'm sorry, Hang Seng and A50 over here. Let me do an update on this, right? Okay, so Hang Seng, okay, didn't really get the impulsive leg that we want, right? So this basically continued to drop. Right now it's testing almost near the bottom of it. Okay. There is a good possibility that we may break this channel. Okay, and price may retest the previous bottom around 18025. So but my take here is, if you get a corrective structure here and you decide to sell, you need to then of course also assess, is that profit potential worthwhile? Okay. So right now, if you get a corrective structure here, you definitely want to focus on sell trade short term. Okay, unless we get a V-shaped formation. Okay, following that, you need to still wait for a correction, right? It's not like V then you buy, you still need to wait for this correction before you jump in. So that's my take on Hang Seng. I think A50 is more or less the same. Okay, so this is definitely pretty impulsive to the downside, which may open up, the possibility that this is a kind of like WXY, right? So that opens up the possibility of further downside as well. Okay, so for me, Asia market, in particularly the A50, China market, as well as Hong Kong. If you're a longer term investor, just not the best time to get involved yet. Okay, if you're looking at shorter term trades, any form of a correction, maybe a short term sell opportunity on that. Okay, so this is on A50 and Hang Seng. Okay, Australia index seems to be completing a three-wave move here. Okay. Okay, the area to focus will be very much around 7163. Okay. So this would put in a nice little WXY, right? So that's the expectation of it. Ideally, if we want to be bullish on this, okay, it needs to be above this recent swing. Okay? Because then this would be where kind of like this structure stands. Okay, so we have this impulsive drive to the upside, this correction, and as long as price is able to be in support here, and more importantly above this, then what we can see is this is 1, this is 2, and then we can expect one more push back up, right? So the area of interest is somewhere around 7160. Okay, obviously you can add in, you know, crawl structure around that zone. That would be ideal. A V-shaped formation, you know, following a correction, then that will all be a potential buy trade to the upside. Okay, and of course, you'll be able to then target, you know, equal links to the upside. Okay. Yeah, so short term, again, if you zoom in, right, short term, then you can consider, you know, maybe to look for sell opportunity. If, you know, kind of like, oops, okay, if you kind of get a correction here, okay, then of course this opens up a short-term sell. Okay, so something like that will open up a sell, right? So if you see this here developing here, then, you know, very obvious that will be a sell trade opportunity to the downside. Right, so something like that. Okay, so I think generally most of this Asia indices are downside, right? So bearish bias onto it. Yeah, even the German VEX seems to be bearish bias, right? So this may come back up a little bit, and then you probably see this as a simple corrective structure. Okay, so impulse, correction, impulse, and will likely come back and retest this low. Okay, so equities in general seems to be you know, in a slightly bigger pullback, if you can put it that way, and short-term bearish opportunity. Kenya. Okay, good. Okay, so kind of cover a bit of a questions over here. Now before we so to wrap up the session, right, I just want to very quickly share with you a upcoming webinar that we have together with Everything Trading. Okay, so the topic of the webinar that we're gonna have is how to maximize your profits and maximize your gains using EA, leveraging on the PAM feature. Okay, now if you're not very familiar with what EA is, it stands for expert advisor, or some people would call it, you know, auto trading, algo trading, robot trading. They're basically the same concept. Okay, so this is a feature, okay, that basically we utilize certain EAs to help us to analyze, execute, manage our trades. I've been running this EA since 2021. Okay, and right now we're tagging it to a PAM account, and PAM account basically stands for Portfolio Allocation Management Module, which allows retail investors to also participate in this particular EA, okay, and automate the entire process of trading. Okay. In this webinar, we're going to talk a little bit more into the EA aspect of things, as well as the features of PAM, to get you kind of like be aware, and of course to educate you about what exactly is the benefits of it, the downside of it, the risk involved. Okay, and by the end of the webinar, if you are interested in kind of like tagging and just basically, you know, following this EA through a PAM system, okay, you are able to do that as well. Okay, so this webinar is going to be conducted on the 23rd of August. Okay, that will be, let me very quickly check. Okay, 23rd of August is going to be next Wednesday. Okay, it's going to be online on Zoom. Okay, so again, doesn't matter whether you're based in Malaysia, you're based somewhere else, you'll be able to do that. Okay, you'll be able to participate and join us, right? So the time of this is going to be 9 p.m. Malaysia time, okay, GMT plus 8. Okay, so if you're, let's say, somewhere else, just take note of the time zone. Okay, so again, what I'll do over here is I'll drop this registration link in the chat box right now. Okay, so in Zoom you guys would have already the registration link. On YouTube I've also posted up in the chat. Okay, so if let's say you like to understand a little bit more about all this, feel free to register. Anyway, it's free. Okay. Yep. Good. So that's all from me for today. Okay. Yeah. Quick one here. I see someone asked about Euro Australia, so very quickly jump into that. On the 1 hour chart, okay, I think Euro Aud, definitely you want to be focusing on sell opportunities. Okay, I mean on the forward it's also very clear, right? So this is definitely a cross structure. We're looking at, again, depending on how aggressive and how conservative you are, right? If you're more conservative, wait for the break, wait for a pullback, that will be a sell trade setup. If you're a little bit more aggressive, okay, you can go down to the lower time frame, wait for the smaller time frame pullback, and then that becomes your execution as well. Okay, so Euro Aud downside, right? So focus on the sell opportunity on Euro Aud if you're looking at this particular pair. Yeah, so yeah, that's all from me for today. Okay, all the best to your trading for the week, and for those of you who are interested in the webinar, okay, do join us next Wednesday. Okay, it's online, it's on Zoom. Okay, so you can actually join us anywhere at the comfort of your home. Okay. Good. Yeah. Okay, how do I input a UK phone number? Yeah, I think this bracket here is basically the country code. Okay, and then yeah, you just need to key in the rest of it. But I think more importantly is your email address, right? Because the Zoom link will be sent to your email address, okay? And sometimes some of the emails will end up in your spam box, right? So just make sure if you don't get a confirmation email, do check into your spam box. It's likely coming from Everything Trading, right? So you receive an email from Everything Trading for the confirmation of your registration to this webinar, and the Zoom link will be inside your email. Okay, so good. That's all from me for today's session over here. All the best to trading as I mentioned. Okay, and we'll see you guys in the next one.